Hey, welcome to the Awakening Report. I'm your host, Doug Hamp. Glad to be with you again. So many exciting things happening in this world, so many weird things happening in this world, unfortunately. We saw just yesterday very unfortunate news of the Russian ambassador to Turkey was gunned down just at point blank range. Apparently, the man that they shot was the bodyguard, if I understood that correctly. We had more violence happening in Germany. It's unfortunate at this time of year when people, rightly or wrongly, are celebrating Christmas. I know there's a whole debate about that, but people are celebrating it, and they're talking about peace on earth and all this goodwill toward men, which of course we find in Scripture. And yet, what do we see in the news? Just the opposite. We see so many heinous things that are happening. It's very unfortunate. Clearly, it's not what God had in mind. And the question always comes up, when is this going to end? Will it ever end? What's going to be the outcome of all these different things? And so we are going to discuss that question. We have another guest back with us. We're so glad to have him back this time from Ingenuity Films. We have once again with us the creator of the Coming Convergence. And how are you doing, Brent? It's so great to have you, Brent Miller Jr.
Yeah, thank you, Doug. It's fantastic to be back on. Thank you for inviting me.
Now, you have some really exciting news. You have a movie coming out that you put together, and it's going to be in the theaters. I'm pretty excited about that. Tell us about the movie.
So, yeah, it's been in production for a couple of years. And again, as in Ingenuity Films fashion, we tackle these complex topics about regarding apologetics, prophecy, and kind of battling a lot of the misinformation that we see in the minds of the public. Because one of the many ways to speak to not only the believers but also the non-believing world is to address prophecy, and it's something that so often is in a light of sensationalism, where many people, including many Christians themselves, are taking it less seriously, or they don't know what to believe. And yet prophecy, the Bible is, some say, is 27% of the Bible is prophetic in nature. And for the Bible to be such a large percentage of prophecy, obviously it's very, very important. And so the Coming Convergence it was a monumental project. Again, 2 years in production, and we're wrapping it up right now in post-production. In fact, I'm in our California office right now, last one here working. It is about actually looking at trends in natural disasters and looking at prophetic history and the remaining prophetic events yet to occur, and really rationalizing not only how much time do we have left, and I'm not talking about date setting here, but just in a larger picture. You will know the season, kind of seeing the writing on the wall of what is coming, and being able to adequately communicate that to Christians and non-believers alike in a way where they can take the biblical record seriously.
That's really exciting. I just want to say for our listeners, you can go there to the YouTube side. Basically, on your right-hand side, there's a little chat box there. You can put questions in. If you have any questions for me or for Brent, and we'd be happy to answer those for you. The idea of the convergence, I mean, obviously, a convergence is when things come together.
Mhm.
So you're talking about the coming convergence. So you're obviously suggesting that something is coming together. What are those events that you see, or that then the documentary that you've created here? What is it that is coming together?
Well, what we mean by convergence is, for quite some time, and we'll get into this in a little bit, but for quite some time, we see multiple layers of prophetic events being fulfilled. And again, not in some sensationalistic sort of way, but very scripturally based on things prophesied, of course, by Daniel, Isaiah, Christ himself, of things that we would see in the last generation at the end of days. And so by convergence, what we're doing is looking at all the different tiers of prophetic events that are being fulfilled. And obviously, they have to come to a point, to a breaking point, where the world drastically begins to change at an exponential level, where it's a domino effect. One thing after another begins occurring, and we enter what many refer to as the tribulation period. And so often we hear about signs in the heavens, and again, this comes from a lot of the sensationalistic views that tend to get a lot of attention, but generally miss the big picture. In that they'll point to one sign that's occurring, one prophetic thing, and say, this is it. This is the end. You know, when Russia entered Syria a year ago and had troops in Syria, you know, this is it. This is, and again, it is
Or
part of
so
it.
a lot of the things that happened in 2012 as well. That whole idea, you know, the end of the Mayan calendar, you know, and then you had
Right.
the blood red moons, and those things have come and gone, right?
Yeah.
And nothing has happened. We're still here.
Yeah.
I guess we could say fortunately. Depends how you look at it. Depends when you think we're getting out of here.
Right.
But you know, and I remember back in 2005, 2006, when Ahmadinejad was hot and heavy, and he had his hand on the trigger. I mean, I really thought we were gonna go. I mean, I thought, my goodness, this is Gog and Magog. We're it. This is it. You know, I mean, how much closer can you possibly get without it actually happening? And you know what? I mean, he had his finger on that trigger the whole time. I thought it was done, and yet nothing happened. You know, it's really weird.
Absolutely, and so many things, and in the larger picture, you know, a decade, 2 decades, it's a very short period of time. I mean, when things begin unfolding, it generally will lead to the fulfillments of these prophetic events, but often the public is so, let's say, farsighted, that they see so little time into the future that, again, we miss the forest through the trees. And so we kind of focus on these individual events of this is a sign for the end, and often miss the much, much larger picture, where these events that are occurring are playing into that end time scenario. They're all pieces of the puzzle. And you brought up 2012 and some of these other events, and that is actually addressed in the Coming Convergence. It's about sensationalism or prediction versus prophecy. In fact, you were a fantastic interview subject in the Coming Convergence. Said quite a few things about this, which we absolutely loved. You said it perfectly. Is that again, the society as a whole, and many Christians even fall for this, this sensationalistic view of all these different individual things occurring, that we almost look at it as if it's prediction. You know, and we've always had prediction. Even the turn of the 19th century, they said this was it, this was the end. What was it, 10 years later in 1910, 1915, somewhere around there, Halley's Comet. And so that's the end. It's a harbinger for the end. It's always a sign in the heavens. It's always one individual thing there and here. And so I think it is deliberately, over the course of the last 100 years, desensitizing people, the public, to confuse predictive events with true biblical prophecy, which, as we know, ranges across thousands of years of fulfillment. And people have such a short attention span today that, you know, they want to hear about biblical prophecy in 2 sentences or less. You know, well, it doesn't work like that. You're talking about, again, the culmination of thousands of years of prophetic events leading to what is truly the end of the world as we know it. And most people just don't want to sit back and hear the whole message of how these pieces are coming together. They fall for the sensationalism, which is why we keep seeing even Christians themselves fall for this over and over and over again. And yet there is a bit of truth in a lot of these things occurring. For example, the turmoil in the Middle East, Russia now getting involved, the changing political climate in Iran, the changing mentality of the world as far as global unity, globalization. These things, they are all actually playing into the fulfillment, this convergence that's going to come to a point, which is going to trigger the beginning of the tribulation period. But in order to really understand the big picture, you have to take a moment and look at all the different pieces and how they connect. because the way God works, it's a complex tapestry of prophetic events that come together perfectly to form that big picture. It's not just one piece of the puzzle, it's all pieces of the puzzle. And even Christ himself, when the disciples were saying, oh, what are the signs of the end? Christ himself was saying it's not just one of these things, wars and rumors of wars, etc., and all the others. It's not just one of these things, it's all of these things. When you see all of these things, that's it. We're close. And again, it's something that's just easily forgotten.
Tell us where this is going to be, because I think people, if they're in the area, this is going to be in Sacramento. So this is showing on the big screen. And where can people go and see this?
Well, the premiere showing is going to be at the Crest Theater in downtown Sacramento on January 7th at 7 p.m.
Right. So January 7th at 7 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
at the Crest Theater in Sacramento. And so if you're in the area, if you're in Sacramento, you guys, go and see this thing. Support this movie. Okay, I'm a little biased. I got to be in it. I'm pretty excited about that. This is my big first and my big debut on the big screen, so I'm a little biased. But, even if I were not in the flick, you should go and see it, because it's going to be a very exciting and educational and entertaining movie. So you'll definitely get your money's worth, but you'll also be supporting a good cause. And what we're trying to do is to create a groundswell, so this will go from being in one theater to being in several, because when they start to see that there is interest in a movie, then it starts to go to other theaters. So, everyone out there, you could really be a part of this and help to make this happen and to grow bigger than just that one theater. And this could really get something that can be used to help people see what's happening, what is going on in Bible prophecy, in a very easy, entertaining, and fun way to do that. And it's a great way to kind of get some conversations going. You kind of show this to different people, etc. So again, January 7th, Crest Theater, Sacramento. If you're in the area, please go and see that. If you're not, fly in and go see it. That'd be awesome. I will be there. I'd love to meet you. So I can be happy to shake anybody's hand. And of course, Brent and his whole crew are going to be there. So that'll be very exciting. All right. Prophecy. We're talking about prophecy. Let's talk about this some more here. So the Coming Convergence. What are some of these big events? Again, we're not talking about the microwave mentality where it's done in 30 seconds. We're talking about a big picture kind of prospect here. What different events are we talking about that you see coming together that you're talking about?
Yeah. Well, first of all, if I could actually just digress for a minute, instead of kind of focusing on some of the specific events that we're looking for, first of all, having a solid foundation in the structure of prophecy is so important. And the reason why we can trust prophecy is because it is structured in a way where when you see it fulfilled, there's no way it could happen by chance. This is why we focus so much on actually studying prophetic events of the past and the future. And the premise of the Coming Convergence, why we can trust that there is a convergence occurring, right? And it's not just coincidence against monumental odds, and uncalculable odds, is that when you look at the prophetic record as a whole, right? If all the prophetic events in the past actually came to be, and we know that through even secular history, right? So everybody can look at it and say, yes, this happened. Tyre fell, to Alexander the Great, just as it was prophesied 200 years earlier, etc. Well, if all these things came to pass with 100% accuracy, in which, by the way, eschatologists believe about 2/3 of all the prophetic events, biblically speaking, have come to pass, then why wouldn't the remaining prophecies also come to pass? Why would all of a sudden the sequence break and it would stop coming to pass? So clearly, if you trust the source of the prophetic information, and this is a complete prophetic timeline from beginning to end, and you're about 2/3 of the way through this timeline, then you would expect the remaining prophetic events to be fulfilled. And that's really the basis of understanding why we can trust these prophetic events. And so we actually bend head over backwards to prove that point in this docu-film. We show a lot of these historical events, when they were made, when they came to pass. We show a track record of following the prophetic timeline over the course of thousands of years. So all the way up to today and beyond to the end, because a lot of people think of prophecy as, oh, there's the past and there's prediction for the future. And again, they forget that biblical prophecy is a single connected beginning to end timeline. I mean, there's prophetic events about the end of days made all the way back in the book of Genesis, for prophesying the coming of Christ and beyond. And so it is a single prophetic timeline that we are moving through.
And it's a really good word, and I think the title convergence really brings us out. But there's different ways you can converge. It's kind of like triangulating your place. The further out your points are for your triangulation, the better you can triangulate within. But then the closer in they are, the less the less area that you can actually triangulate. So what we're doing here is you're taking a very big swath of prophetic land, if you will, and you're using that to then give us a really big diameter so that we can look at this thing and then come in. And so the convergence is going to be much more sure because we're starting from a much bigger perspective. You're not just starting like 10 years ago and say, look, well, these things happened 10 years ago, so therefore this is going to happen a year from now. And you're saying, look at 5,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago, all these things were prophesied, and you start to come in, and then the bullseye is that much more accurate when you get right down to it. Is that the idea?
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. That's absolutely right. And we're the last people in the world to set a date and say, oh, 2017 is the year. I mean, no, we're not gonna go there. And yet what you said is spot on. It really is kind of triangulating this convergence that's occurring where you can see the season. And that's why one of the misnomers that this film easily battles and disproves is the fact that you really can't possibly know when Jesus is possibly coming back. So why even give it a second thought? That's actually contradicting to what Jesus himself taught and what the scriptures tell us to do. We are told to be ready, have plenty of oil, that he is coming back soon, and he tells us the signs. That's why a lot of denominations will teach, well, he can come back at any moment. It's not entirely true. Jesus actually said, these are the things that are going to happen in sequence, in this order, and you will see all these things happen at one point, and then the end is near. And then he will return shortly after that. So he was very, very specific. And Bible prophecy, those that study true eschatology understand how very specific it is. Naming names, nations, alliances, the numbers of individuals and armies, and it's very specific. And again, that's the difference between prediction and prophecy. Some people look at Nostradamus and say, well, that's prophecy, right? No, it was very general. And you can't even compare that to true biblical prophecy. So what we're saying, again, we're not setting a date when we're saying, 5 years, 10 years, it's all going to converge, because again, I don't know. It doesn't actually tell us, but the idea that you can't possibly know isn't really correct, because you will know the season. In fact, there is so much biblically speaking about the Galilean wedding feast, where Jesus uses the Galilean culture to explain things like the rapture and some of these things that will be occurring at the end of the last days, where he talks about, waiting. It uses a lot of the cultural symbolisms, like having the white robes and waiting and not being left out in the streets where there's gnashing of teeth, being, to make it into the wedding party. Make sure you have plenty of oil, because others will run out of oil and they'll ask you for oil, but you can't give it to them because you won't have enough for yourself. And on and on and on, this picture of knowing when it is coming, where you don't know the exact day or hour. True, of course not. But that's not to be misinterpreted as you can't possibly know when it is at all. No, right. You don't know the day or the hour, but you know the night. You know it's around right now. That's the point.
And the day or the hour, from what I've studied that really comes from Yom Teruah,
Mm,
which is Feast of Trumpets. And the Feast of Trumpets always happens on the first day of the month. And that's the interesting thing about the first day of the month when you look at it from a lunar cycle. So when you have obviously a new month means a new moon, right? That's the whole idea. So the first day of the new moon, you really can't see it. There's kind of day one or day two, you may or may not be able to see it with your naked eye. And it's only when you have two witnesses that have seen that can both testify, yes, we have both seen this. And it can vary from one day to the next, because you don't know when it's going to happen. But you certainly know the day, the time in the season, right? You know, hey, it's been
oh, yeah.
about 28 days. It's going to happen any day now. So you have the time in the season already given, but you don't know the specific day and the specific hour. And I think what has happened is we've kind of run with this without that understanding as Gentiles, and we've said, well, we have no idea, because Jesus didn't know the day or the hour, and so neither can we. Well, it's true, we don't know the day or the hour. If we just keep it as the day and the hour and not, take that and extrapolate it to, we don't know any idea when he's coming, then I think that really will help us to see that we can actually know the general season. In fact, Paul himself says, brethren, you have no need for me to write to you concerning the times and the seasons, for you yourselves know that the day of the Lord comes as a thief in the night to those who are in darkness. I find that there in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 is one of those passages that is used so frequently, and people tend to stop and they say, he's going to come like a thief in the night, period, right? But he says, but you, brethren, are not in darkness, so that this day should overtake you as a thief. You're all sons of the light, sons of the day, not of the darkness or of the night. So therefore let us not sleep as others do, but let's be watch and be sober. All right, so we are to know, Paul says we can know the times and the seasons. And something that I found in prophecy is that we, eschatologists tend to have a tendency, in my opinion, to spend most of their time looking at this either from the Gospels or from the Pauline epistles. And yet, when Paul said that there's no need for me to write to you concerning the times and the seasons, how is it that they knew that? Did he download all this incredible information, or did they already have the scriptures in their hands that they could go and check this stuff out? Yeah,
Mm,
that's what they had, is they already
yeah.
had that. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and as you bring up the seven feasts, without saying as much, looking at the seven prophetic feasts, just like we saw the first feast fulfilled, the remaining fall feasts again. They are set appointments for these prophetic fulfillments, and so like you were stating, we don't know the exact day or the hour, but yeah, you absolutely know pretty much when it's going to happen. And again, the point of the coming convergence is looking at all that global evidence that was prophesied and looking at these I'll just say it, frightening patterns that it
mhm.
is converging to a point. And again, you can't say that specific day, but it is converging to a point, whereas decades ago, where you didn't know if things were going to occur in decades or 100 years or 200 years, now we're seeing things come to a point where it can't be 100 years out. It
Mhm.
can't be 60 years out. It's becoming frighteningly converging to a point where it's breaking all of our statistical models. I mean, here's a perfect example.
Mhm.
And again, I believe it's a bit of a misnomer of the nature of God. If we look at God's prophetic fulfillments in the Old Testament, okay, we take a lot of these. He often uses natural disasters to fulfill His will. When Israel was taken to captivity, he would use foreign armies to do it. Evil foreign armies would come in, and without them even knowing it, they'd be fulfilling God's will. So God is constantly using man's governments and nature and what is His creation, that we often so often forget, that He created everything that we see, the cycles in the earth and the universe. So obviously He uses His creation to carry out His prophetic will, to carry these things out. And so you have this misnomer that some people will look at prophetic events at the end of days and say, well, it's all going to break the laws of physics, and God can just do it whatever way he wants, because they look at these prophetic events in Revelation and how kind of mysterious they sound. And they don't really grasp the big picture of how God really does use his nature, his cycles, his sequences, and his creation to fulfill his will. And an example is this, is that a lot of eschatologists say that at the end of days, it is very possible with the prophetic descriptions that Earth is hit by, let's say, a small asteroid or a meteor or something that causes a lot of devastation, for example. Well, if that were the case, does that mean that God materialized this space body, right before it impacts the Earth? Or was this space body created and floating out there since the beginning of time to fulfill its purpose at the exact converging moment that God needed it to be to fulfill his prophetic event? And that's why when we look at prophetic events throughout the Old Testament, this is what we see constantly, where they seem to be natural events. And you have people saying, oh, you're removing God from prophecy. Not at all. We're not removing God from the equation at all. What we're seeing is things that are statistically impossible, where you have natural events and peoples and signs converging and occurring in a way where it cannot be coincidence. They absolutely cannot be coincidence. And God often works like this. Doesn't have to all the time, but often does. And even, for example, take the birth of Christ. I think we spoke about this before very quickly. 3 of the prophetic things around Christ is that he would be born in Bethlehem, called out of Egypt, and we refer to as a Nazarene. Well, those 3 statements are very contradicting to each other. Clearly, it can't be all 3. This is, very contradicting scripture here, and yet all 3 came to be. And when you look at the fulfillment of those 3 events, you can't say they were, they broke any laws of physics. You can't say it was any kind of miracle in the sense of what people kind of interpret a miracle as. They were all events that occurred based on political situations and just events that just happened to unfold. And yet, what is the statistical probability that all 3 of these contradicting things just happened at all? It's virtually impossible. Okay, so if we kind of look at how these prophetic events unfold and we look at the things that are occurring at the end of days, a lot of it is very similar. For example, I brought up the whole meteor asteroid example, how it must already exist to fulfill God's purpose this entire time. Well, if that's the case, then the convergence that we see for a lot of the events that Christ warned us about that would all happen again at the same time and globally, that was kind of the key phrase, all these things would happen. If that's how God's nature works with some of these events, then clearly you can see these signs happening now. And we can. Even when Christ speaks of natural disasters and earth change, some of these things that seem to be mostly out of man's control, you see the writing on the wall. And again, just like the 3 descriptions around Christ's birth, you look at the multiple descriptions at the end of days and how they will converge to trigger the beginning of the tribulation. And it's almost statistically impossible to deny the fact that you see the political, the war, the economic, the religious, and the natural convergences of all these things happening and increasing to a point, and have that be just chance. There's absolutely no way.
Wow. That is exciting stuff. As you were saying that, I started thinking about the crossing of the Red Sea. I mean, when God parted the Red Sea, that was clearly a miracle, and yet he used wind, right? I mean, the wind is a very natural kind of thing, right? It's a very strong wind, but we have strong winds all the time. We have hurricanes and tornadoes and stuff, and we don't think those are supernatural, but we do think that, they are. Well, they're not really so great, are they? So here you have a wind that's now going and parting that Red Sea, but it was God who directed it. And I think you're so right that we so often forget. I think because, kind of going back to the beginning, people want to explain how all these things happened, how the creation of the entire cosmos happen in a very naturalistic sense,
Right.
and you know, not realizing that these laws were not, and God is the one who brought them into existence. You just kind of think, well, that's just the way things happen, but it doesn't just happen that way. Take your computer, for example. It's not like just things on your computer just happen to be there, right? Well, when I open it up, they just happen to be there, right? Well, yeah, but it took millions and millions of man hours to create every one of those apps,
Hmm.
so that we could then just click on them and they happen to work, right? And that's the same thing with life, with this universe. Is God is the one who coded everything into it. And so now when he then does something at the end of days, or some kind of a miraculous or judgmental kind of event, then it may not have all the glitter and stuff that we think of for a miracle, but it's still God is the one who is directing it. So I think you make a very good point there. So kind of tell us a little bit about this movie. Like, what can we expect from the movie? That's one of the questions from the live chat. They're asking, what can we expect? Kind of tell us about, scene, Act One, Act Two, Act Three. What's the general progression of the movie?
Well, we primarily do documentaries. So this is a documentary film, but our production style is far more cinematic. In fact, those that had gone to even can go right now to the comingconvergence.com and watch the trailer. That's right there.
I'm going
You'll
to show that
see.
while you're talking, so
So,
keep
oh, sure,
talking, and then I'll.
sure, go for it.
Yeah. Okay.
And what we wanted to do is actually a very different kind of documentary. It's very exciting, very intense, kind of frightening. Some of the people that have screened it in the office here over the last couple of weeks, some actually became very emotional, and also very, very fearful, because it is a wake up call. A lot of these things, Christians, as Christians, we shouldn't fear. We should have hope that we see these things coming to fruition. But much of the world will fear the things that are coming. They won't be prepared for it. Again, they won't have the oil. They won't be prepared. Christ will come like a thief in the night to those people. But as you can see, we actually went out with our actor, that's her, Aaron Hawkins, to a set outside of Chicago. And it actually partly tells the story of a girl living in the tribulation period. And this is her in the trailer, where the entire documentary is her telling us the warnings that we hear today, the sensationalistic news, the globalism that's occurring, all the signs, basically all the writing on the wall for all the different tiers of prophetic convergences that we see and debate and argue about now. Well, to her, it's not an argument. They've happened, they've converged. This is the way things came to be. And now she is in a world where there is death and suffering. And as far as the world's view is concerned, no hope, a loss of hope, just suffering. And this is on the cusp of when the world is trying to create a utopia, just like man did in the days of Babel, etc. Let's all get together, pull up our bootstraps, and forget God. Let's create utopia on earth ourselves with our perfect, new world society, which again, we see the writing on the wall for. So this isn't your traditional kind of cookie documentary. It is part film, where she'll kind of interrupt the documentary at times with her view of how things really unfolded from her perspective, which is kind of related to some of the things that we're talking about, where it is clearly God doing these things, but the world doesn't see it that way. And even biblically speaking, we know there will be a blindness that falls upon the world in the last days. Now, if the world was seeing blatant miracles, clearly that kind of interrupts the blindness aspect of it. Christians will see God's hand on everything that's happening. But the secular world, the world as a whole, won't. That they will be blind to everything that is unfolding. And this really has a very kind of apologetics, rational based view on why the world is blind. And in addition to all the things that are actually converging and happening now, that is going to trigger the beginning of the tribulation period. So again, part film, part documentary, definitely something not only every Christian should watch, but something everybody should watch. Yeah.
Well, it's a fantastic trailer. When you, of course, we didn't get to hear the music, unfortunately. It sounds a whole lot better, and she's giving a little narrative of what is going on in her mind, what's happening in the world, as you were saying. So it's very well done. I really appreciate the cinematography because that is something that can certainly be lacking in some documentaries. And so this is not going to be just a bunch of talking heads. And you're like, okay, that's kind of boring. I could have just listened and it would have been easier. This is going to be something that's visually stimulating, something that is really going to get people to think and to see things on the screen. It's not just talking heads, but it is a lot of good imagery that is going to help people to understand. And this would be something that you'd be proud uh, to share with a neighbor or an unbeliever as well, so that they can kind of get that big picture of what it is we're talking about, right? And I think something that is really difficult when it comes to eschatology is to wake people up without scaring them, because I think sometimes we can go completely on the wrong end of things. And I'm just saying this because you mentioned this about people watching it and they got scared. The
Mm.
idea is not to create panic or fear. That can happen, and the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So a certain amount of that is healthy, because we do want to be in that place where we are understanding what is happening in our world and how we can do something about that. But we also want to be careful to not just create fear. We want to help people to understand that bigger picture, and that there's always hope. That, I think, is something that's often lacking. Is we want our e-ticket out of here, and we see all these bad things happening, and so see how close we are, and when it gets bad, we're going to get out of here, and that's the end of it. And I won't get into that whole rapture topic,
Yeah.
but I think that is something that is very dangerous, because it can cause us to become um, just people where what's the fatalist? We can become fatalists and say, well, it doesn't really matter. It's all going to burn. It's about 5 years out, and then it's over.
Mhm.
Whereas what I'm seeing in Scripture is that God is saying, I want you to be the salt and the light. I want you to be the light of this world. I want you to get out there to make a difference. Don't give up. Don't throw in the towel. Yes, the world is a mess. Yes, we just look at the news. You don't have to look very far, and you see that the world is an incredible mess. As I was saying at the beginning of the show, that there was an assassination yesterday of the Russian ambassador. I mean, point blank range. It was crazy. And then another, apparently an Afghan refugee, if I understood correctly, uh, rented a truck and he ran it into a bunch of people in Germany. All right. Now, I mean, as I was thinking about that, I was thinking, it's tragic, it's awful, I'm sad, but I have to wonder, is this part of that bigger thing that God is allowing events to happen, and he's slowly bringing judgment, or he's allowing judgment to happen on us? I saw this article today where the survivors of the victims in the Pulse disco in Florida, or whatever they call them, club, the Pulse Club,
Mm.
that homosexual club, and a lot of people were killed there. I think it was around 50 people. I mean, I'm sad that that happened. I don't wish death upon these people. But I mean, I have to say, you have a lifestyle that is completely contrary. It's rebellious to God. And that's just one extreme example. But I think we could look all throughout our society and say, you know what? We're kind of giving God the finger all the time, not just in these kind of bigger ways, homosexuality, but in a lot of other smaller ways as well that we think are okay, whereas those guys over there, that homosexual club, they were wrong, but we're okay over here. And I think there is a coming convergence, that as we continue to sow to unrighteousness, we continue to sow to lawlessness. That's what it is. We're sowing lawlessness. I mean, the Bible is very, 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 very clear, right? Paul says, God is not mocked. He says, don't be deceived. God's not mocked. What you sow is what you'll reap.
Mhm.
And something that's really struck out to me is that something that has stuck out to me is that you have the coming of the lawless one. I'm like, well, why is he called the lawless one? Because that is what people want. We
Absolutely.
want lawlessness. And that's what we're going to get. We're going to have a leader who's known as the lawless one.
Right. I mean, that's why when he comes on the scene, the world embraces it. He doesn't take the world through war. He takes it through peace, through promises, through, being charismatic. Again, he will probably be perceived by much of the world as the greatest leader that ever lived and a type of Messiah, as the worldly Messiah. And why? Because, like you were stating, we are going to reap what we sow, and what we are sowing is global lawlessness in every area you can imagine, not just sexual morality, but also the idea that, again, we can pull up our own bootstraps and make the world our own, do it our way, our image, created in our image, just like they did back in the days of Babel. It's just history repeating itself again, just again like back in the days of Noah. It's wickedness and self-worship. And so, of course, we want to embrace a new leader. The world will embrace a new leader that they rise up, which is going to be like the earthly Christ. I mean, he is a replacement for Christ, the anti-Christ. And so the world will worship him in an earthly, secular fashion. And in order for that to happen, again, this is kind of part of looking at the convergence, and just that one small aspect amongst all the other layers that are converging. Let's look at just that one aspect. In order for the world, not just Western culture, Western thinkers or Greek thinkers, but the world to come to a political point mentally where the entire world embraces that kind of thinking, right? Where they want a man like that in power. And that's the key. They want him in power. He doesn't take it by force. The world will demand that he takes power because he's got all the answers. That means psychologically, the world has to be changing, where not only do we see this drastic change in globalism, which means what the world is saying, oh, we are united, we are all one. Now that, South Africa and Russians and Americans, we're all on the same page now. We're all thinking the same thing. It supersedes religion now, and that's really the point. It's a whole new rise of a mystery religion, mystery Babylon. It's a whole new way of global thinking. And in order for that to happen, just some of the things we see occurring is the blurry lines between religious beliefs. Also, the idea that we are grasping worldly, physical things in life that are becoming more important than spiritual truth and spiritual pursuits. Now everything is about the greater good and protecting the earth and protecting society, coming together, becoming one, globalism, economic security, security against war, security against disease, everything is becoming about the here and the now, the physical world. And that's why we raise up a physical Messiah that doesn't have eternal life, that is
Let, let,
limited
let
to
me
here in this
let me
world.
just play the devil's advocate for a second, because I often hear this, and I'm sure you mean it in the very best way. So I just want to kind of throw this out there
Sure.
for argument's sake. But I mean, I really believe that we should take care of the earth, and I believe that we should do, as much as we can to help people and to come together, and we don't want to be just divisive for divisive sake. So how do we as Christians parse that line between, being good stewards of the earth, being good citizens, taking care of our communities, doing all those green things and all,
Right.
all that stuff, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with being green. I think it can become a religion, but I'm into recycling. Does that mean that I shouldn't recycle? Or, like, how do we how do we live responsibly? Because we don't know. That's what we've said very clearly. We don't know when Jesus is coming back. We think
Right.
it's soon. We believe the signs are pointing, to his soon return. But, let's say that you and I, kick the bucket before he comes back. I'd like to leave the world, in a decent shape, and hopefully a little bit better than when I got here, for my kids' sake. So
Absolutely. I mean, I
yeah,
have children. Obviously, I clearly understand that. And there's nothing wrong with recycling. I mean, we all work here in California, and it's practically a law here. So, but no, there's nothing wrong with taking care of God's earth. It's His creation. We shouldn't destroy it. We should protect it. We should be environmentally conscious. And again, just as you stated, you said it perfectly. There's a difference between wanting to take care of God's creation and being responsible versus it becoming a religion. And that's really the key, is that globally speaking, it is becoming a religion. It's not becoming about, let's take care of God's earth. I haven't seen that on any, recycling bins lately. It's, we need to take the care of the earth for building our own sustainable, perpetual utopia. And that's what it is. It's about the heart. And often when we look at even much of what Christ taught and in biblical teaching, that the heart is the most important thing there is as far as our intentions in the eyes of God. It's not necessarily just the action. If you have two people and in both scenarios they end up, say, having to kill another person, that's a horrible, horrible thing. But in one hand, the heart is murder, and in the other hand, it's something completely different. And it's so when we look at things like taking care of the earth, recycling, is it because we want to be responsible for our children and we're appreciative of God's creation? Or have we crossed the line and we're now worshiping the creation? And the world as it stands now, as far as sustainability, globalization, world unity, it's about worshiping the creation itself and about worshiping ourselves. And it has superseded anything to do with God. And that's the danger in it.
One of the questions that's come in is, does the movie get into anything about UFOs, aliens, and that sort of stuff?
No, it doesn't at all. Because there is actually, just as far as the basic prophetic timeline in history and some of just the very basic prophetic things that are going to be fulfilled at the end of days, it actually, you can get so in depth with just those very basic tip of the iceberg topics. There's no way we could get into any of these more, let's say, kind of more in-depth topics. And let's not forget that the majority of the world, this documentary speaks to everybody. I mean, we're talking about, the scientists down the street, the atheists, because it's truth. It's based on real biblical truth, statistics, and apologetics. So it has to speak to everybody. And there's some topics that if you get into, let's face it, people put up a wall. It can get very, very odd very quickly when you're talking about a very wide audience. So for this documentary, we felt it was more important to stick to kind of some of the topics that we know everybody has heard of and really look at the truth behind those very in more depth.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's one of those, fun topics, but like you said, it's probably not going to, people would get quickly sidetracked just on that one topic versus
Absolutely.
this bigger picture that you are trying to portray to help them see, the big picture from the bird's eye view versus getting into a very focused type of topic. Okay, so, well, that's good to know. Another one of the questions, let me just get back here to some of these. So let's see here. One person had asked, sorry, I'm just trying to scroll through these questions really quick here. Let's see. Here's a question. Where in the timeline does Michael blow the trumpet for the dead in Christ? Does the movie cover any of that, or do you have any personal thoughts on that?
Actually, that can be a bit of a controversial topic. We don't head into that. Again, this kind of documentary, it has to be for the general public. It has to be for the widest audience possible. When you get into these specific kind of details, which we see a lot more in the kind of the theologian presentations, the prophecy conferences, and you're assuming that getting into those types of details, you're assuming the audience already knows what Bible prophecy is in the first place.
Okay.
So it's just, again, it's too in depth that you're going to completely lose the audience before we even begin. So what we're doing, we really do start at square one, but it is in a way that really does captivate even the Christian audience. It's hard to explain. It's one of those things you just have to see to believe. But we start at the very beginning. What is prophecy? And
Okay.
again, even a lot of Christians don't even understand that. They don't understand that there's real scientific facts behind prophetic fulfillment. Again, that's why we hear a lot about whenever you start speaking about statistical probabilities and history and convergences and all the things that we see over thousands of years of eschatology or studying this through eschatology. You have a lot of Christians that will say, oh, we're taking God out of the equation. And not at all. I mean, again, God created the universe. This is the way he works. So you really are, if you want to really present truth in a way where you can even turn someone who is an absolute skeptic and make them stop and think, wow, there really might be something to this, then you have to start from square one and really walk them through the process of what is prophecy, what has happened, what is coming, what is converging, why you can trust it, and why it absolutely is going to happen. And it's not just a theory or it's fear mongering or it's sensationalism, why this is real. And that's what I meant before about some of the people we had screening in the office here were very frightened by it. It's not because we were saying, oh, these horrible things are going to happen. It was because it was done in such a way that it proved these things are going to happen. And if you're not following Christ, if you don't have that hope, if you don't understand what hope there is, then the initial reaction is fear, because look at what's coming upon the world. It is very fearful for most people. And again, just to kind of backtrack a little bit here, is that the film does get into, well, what is the ultimate point? What is the point of prophecy? So that's kind of the bigger picture we're getting into. So even if you, after this long docu-film, you get to the point where, we're proving these things are converging statistically, this is what's happening, look at this data, look at all these things, this is very frightening to the average person and it's happening, we even step back and say, why? Well, why? I mean, obviously there is a point. There is a bigger picture of why God uses prophecy, again, to prove that these things are happening. So we don't just have to take his word for it. He bends over backwards to prove to us it's happening. That's the point of prophecy. When you see these things, you'll know that, that he is the one doing it. So it's to prove it. Now, the secular world needs to understand that. But the whole point is you see these things happening, so you know that he's in control. So that why you trust him when he says there is eternal life, there is something better to look forward to, that this life is temporary, and do not fear. And that's the point. So the things that are coming are very scary. But there is such incredible hope that
Yeah.
you have to get to the point to see it.
Yeah, and I was just thinking of here in Luke 21:26, it talks about the signs in the sun, the moon, and stars, etc. And it says, men's hearts failing them from fear and the expectation of those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. And so when you were showing this, and people who you're screening kind of the average Joe, if you will,
Yeah.
and they're coming out fearful because and this is powerful. You are proving statistically that these things are going to happen. It's not just some wacko theory. It's not just some guy that drank too much Kool-Aid or something. But, this is now been proven through statistics, and that's very powerful. So I think that's really, I'm glad that you clarified that for us, that this is not just a niche film for niche Christians, right? This is a general film for the general public. It's designed for the person who has no idea that the world's going to end. They had no idea that Jesus is coming back, or maybe he's heard about something, but he doesn't know anything about what those things really mean. He doesn't know what Armageddon is really all about, or what the apocalypse is really all about. And so you're going to start people who have a blank slate, and you're going to say, hey guys, this, by the way, this is what's coming. Let's talk about what this even means at the most fundamental level, and then we'll go up to some more of a few of the particulars, but really to kind of lay that broad foundation so that people can understand what prophecy is, and then it is going to happen, and then ultimately they need to get right with Jesus. And so this can be a tremendous evangelistic tool as well. So again, if you're in the Sacramento area, I just invite you to be there January 7th. Tell us the name of the theater again.
The premiere is going to be at the Crest Theater in downtown Sacramento at 7
Crest,
p.m.
okay, Crest Theater, downtown Sacramento, 7 p.m. January 7th. It's going to be there for a few days, or how
Uh,
long can we expect it?
Actually, it is a one-time public sneak peek. It's a one-time showing, and our whole film crew is going to be there. Some of the people featured in the documentary will be there, and the doors are going to open about an hour before for a meet and greet. If anyone wants to show up and say hello, I will be there. And yeah,
And I will be there as well. So if you're in the area, I'll be there. I would love to get to shake your hands, everybody, and it'd just be a real opportunity and a real pleasure to meet some people that watch the Awakening Report. And it'd be exciting, you know. Bring your friends, tell your church. This is an awesome opportunity to support a lot of hard work that Brent and his whole team have put into this thing, because it really does take 2 years. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of countless thankless hours that happen post production that have to be done that nobody ever gets to see. Just the guy on the screen gets all the credit, but the guy behind the screen that makes it all happen, puts it together, and does that cinematographic wizardry that we all have come to love. And this one is going to be a real eye catcher. So I'm excited about it. Brent, I want to thank you again for coming on the show, for sharing this with us. And if you're in the Sacramento area or you want to fly in, please do that. January 7th. Get there at 6 o'clock, and we'll be there for a meet and greet. And that'll be a lot of fun. And then we'll get to go see really just a wonderful presentation, and something that you can then order your own DVD and share that with your community or with people in your circles. So again, thank you. Everybody can check this out, by the way, at thecomingconvergence.com. And Brent, tell them the name of your website as well.
Well, in addition to the comingconvergence.com, you can find out more about Ingenuity Films at ingenuityfilms.com. And a lot of our products and even a series on Revelation is there, and you can learn more about us.
Okay, ingenuityfilms.com and thecomingconvergence.com, and January 7th, if you can, be there. Would love to see you, love to meet you. Everyone, stay in the Word. God's Word is true. Jesus is coming. He's still on the throne. He will always be on the throne. And everyone, thank you for tuning in. Until next time, God bless.